When you think about it, the urban parcel or tradie van has probably the most to gain from electrification. I mean, cleaner air, quieter streets, and no range anxiety, because most of them don't actually venture that far from home base during the average working day. And all of that means that this vehicle, the all-electric E-Transit from Ford, is an absolute no-brainer. And yes, I should be wearing a high vis. What is less obvious, however, is what sort of value the E-Transit represents. If you can charge from a renewable power source that you control, then the van's purchase price suddenly becomes a case of front-loading your ongoing running costs. But if you're stuck with paying for charging at a commercial station, or you still think the 60 grand ask for Ford's diesel-powered transits is a bit rich, you might want to look away. That's because the E-Transit will rush you $104,990 in its cheapest format, the mid-roof model with no options. Add the higher roof and the ticket becomes $106,490, and an extra sliding side door takes it to $107,490. You do, however, get plenty of connectivity with Ford's Sync 4 system, accessible via a 12-inch touchscreen. Ford's selectable drive modes also take the van concept into new territory and, crucially, offer a setting that makes the vehicle a one-pedal drive. Great in traffic and good for energy regeneration. The full pricing and specification info is on the CarsGuide website. Despite using a completely different driveline to the rest of the diesel engine transit range, there's a surprising amount of shared platform technology across that lineup. While many car makers switching to electric power design completely new platforms with batteries in mind, Ford has retained much of the existing transit architecture and engineered aluminium cradles to mount the electric motor and battery pack. Interestingly, the main visual difference of the E-Transit is the blue highlighting on the grille. Beyond that, you've really got to look at the badges to pick it. Practicality is the other area that Ford has seemed to have got right with the current generation Transit in any of its forms. There's big bins on the dashboard, there's overhead bins here, there's cup holders everywhere, big door pockets, plenty of sockets, there's little cubby holes all over the place. There's not a single square centimetre of this vehicle that isn't doing one or more jobs, and that's really important. Again, when you're a working person with clipboards and receipt books and all manner of stuff that has to have a place to live and has to be where you've left it so you can find it next time, cars like this have a very important role in making that possible. And you're going to find that the average person using this vehicle is really going to appreciate that over time. Maybe not even in a showroom sense, it's not going to drag them into showrooms, but once you've lived with it for 6 months, if you go back to a vehicle that didn't have that sort of amenity, then you would really notice it. Like most EVs, the E-Transit has just one gear in its transmission. It doesn't need any more, it's so torquey. And the batteries live under the floor, nice and flat, nice and low. So this car can carry as much bulk as any other Transit in the lineup. It's rear-wheel drive and the performance is pretty good. This car has 198 kilowatts of power, which is more than any other Transit in the lineup. Now, the only catch to all that performance is that Ford says, and this isn't just for Australia, this is globally, Ford says the E-Transit is not to be used for towing. Obviously, there are technical reasons for that, technical aspects for that decision, but it does seem like a shame because with all that performance, it would be a pretty good tow car. But if you want to tow something, you need to go for a turbo diesel Transit, not this one. The E-Transit has a 68 kilowatt battery, which is enough to give it a 307 kilometre range based on the European WLPT test drive cycle. The good news is that EVs achieve their best range in stop-start and urban traffic, exactly how the average E-Transit will operate. Ford has fitted the vehicle with an onboard AC charger which operates at 11.3 kilowatts and can completely charge the van's battery in 8 hours. If you have access to a DC fast charger of sufficient capacity, the Transit will accept a charge of 115 kilowatts, which will take the battery from 15% to 80% charged in a claimed 34 minutes. So, what's the E-Transit like to drive? Well, it's actually really simple. If you're familiar with vans and the fact that they're wide and bulky and high and you need to leave a little bit more room when you're going around roundabouts, you'll be fine. So anyone who's driven a van before will have absolutely no problem with this. It's very smooth and it's very quiet. And I think in terms of using this as your office, it's going to be a nicer place to spend 8 hours than your average smelly, rattly, noisy diesel-powered van. So it's got that going for it. I think driver fatigue levels could be the big winner here. The ride is actually also pretty good. Now look, the current Transit in any of its forms is actually one of the better vans out there, but this one's on nice high 65 series tyres, and even with no load in the back, it actually rides very well. Of course, the other thing people want to know about EVs is one of the first questions they ask is, does it go fast in a straight line? Well, this is like any EV. It produces maximum torque at 0 RPM, so you better believe that in normal mode, eco mode's a bit slower, but in normal mode, this thing is fairly quick. It would dust pretty much any diesel van ever made. It really gets going. But at the same time, because it's so quiet and it's so smooth, it's actually a little bit deceptive. I think people might get caught out. It's so quiet in here. You can hear the indicators. It sounds like a clock ticking. I'm going to try a U-turn because one of the big complaints about vehicles in urban areas is they don't do nice tight U-turns. And I've got a feeling this could be a bit the same. So let's see, shall we? Actually, that's pretty good. That is actually, considering the length of the vehicle, that is pretty darn good. Because you've got to remember that, you know, you're in and out of cities, you're in and out of little laneways and alleyways. Having to do a 3-point turn every time you want to turn one of these around. You've also got to remember that your average parcel delivery driver, he's making possibly dozens of drops every day, every single day of his working life. He's stopping and starting the car. And that requires manoeuvring it. And if it can't fit into, you know, compact spaces and it can't sort of get out of its own way, if it's falling over its own girth all the time, that's no good. There are 3 drive modes in the e-Transit. There's Eco, which takes the edge off performance, Normal, which is my favourite because it gets away from the lights pretty sharpish, and then there's Slippery, which is, I guess, designed for Europe where there's a lot of ice and snow on the roads. But the other clever thing is this button on the rotary gear selector called L. If you press that, it suddenly beefs up the motor regeneration. So you don't need the brake pedal as much, you just back off the throttle in it, and it turns the van into almost a one-pedal car. It sounds weird, but once you get used to it, it's a really efficient way of driving because you're maximising the amount of recharge that you're putting into the batteries. And around town in traffic, that can be a considerable amount. It will extend the range of the vehicle. Commercial vehicles have, thanks to OH&S concerns, never been safer than they are today, and the e-Transit follows that trend with the latest driver aids as part of the deal. You get autonomous emergency braking, for instance, that works both below and above 80 kilometres an hour. There's also tech such as blind spot monitoring and assistance, rear parking sensors, and a very good rear camera. All important additions in a vehicle like this with a limited view to the rear and a propensity to be used in situations where people and obstacles are likely to be present. For the full story, you can check out the written review of the e-Transit on the CarsGuide website. Running costs are a big deal for fleet managers where every dollar spent is critical to the company's bottom line. With that in mind, everything but the electric driveline bits of the e-Transit are covered by Ford's standard 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. The electric driveline components, meanwhile, get 8 years or 160,000 kilometres of warranty, whichever comes first. Servicing intervals are every 30,000 kilometres or 12 months. Beyond that, the e-Transit's running costs will very much depend on how you recharge it and what sort of charging technology you use to do so. The Ford Transit's been around a long time now, and right from the word go, it was an incredibly popular vehicle. In fact, there was a rumour going around England in the 60s that there wasn't a single bank heist or armed robbery or burglary that didn't involve a Transit as transport for the bad guys. And of course, now that crime has moved into computer hacking and online scams, maybe the Cyber Transit is just a vehicle whose time has come. But even if you're not a cyber baddie looking for a quick way away from the cops, this car gains so much from the concept of electrification and is so much the better for being an EV that it really should make a lot of fleets' shortlists.